Hello and welcome back to our podcast, People Acting Like Lawyers and Mostly Malarkey, here on Listen Frederick. I'm your co-host Meg, and with me is my co-host Dee, better known as Devin.
Hello again, everybody.
Devin and I are both Maryland lawyers. Devin is an immigration lawyer. And this podcast episode in no way constitutes legal advice, which can only be obtained via a licensed attorney in the context of a private and confidential legal consultation. Hence, we disclaim any and all liability for what our listeners may or may not do in their own lives based upon our dialogue on this podcast, which is strictly for entertainment purposes only.
And remember, please drink responsibly.
Thanks, Dee. Today's episode is Practical Tips for Hiring a Lawyer. Our subtopics today may include what you should consider, what not to do, and when to use your instincts or go with your gut. So to kick off our third episode here on People Acting Like Lawyers, we're starting with a toast of Old Smoky Spirits. This is salty caramel whiskey from Tennessee.
Salute.
Salud. See, that's good.
I like that. I like it. It vaguely reminds me of like Jack Daniel's honey. It's like kind of got a little nice. It kind of takes out the kick.
I think I like it better than the Jack Daniel's honey. So Devin, what do you think are some factors that clients should consider when looking for an attorney?
The first thing, you should always be cognizant of how you feel during the consultation. When you're speaking to an attorney, how do you feel when you're talking to them? You don't have to hire an attorney that you don't feel comfortable with just because they have a great reputation. Everybody says to go to that attorney. You have options. I think you should have 1 or 2 or 3 consultations if you have the opportunity to before you actually hire an attorney.
Before you pay that retainer.
What about you? What do you think?
Well, it's like at-will employment, right? So you can fire your lawyer for any reason or for no reason at all. So I think you want to hire slow and fire fast, right?
Correct. But why do they say hire slow and fire fast?
Because you want to know what you're getting into.
Yeah,
and you don't want to dive into the deep end of the pool.
And you want. Yeah, correct. You don't want to be in too deep with somebody and you can't go back. Or, going back is much more difficult than if you never started to deal with it in the first place.
Well, in a civil case, when you have litigation going on, yes, it's not something that you want to do. So that's up to each individual person, whether they want to go around and get the free consults and feel people out that way. But I even think you can even get a sense of someone just talking to them on the phone initially. But a lot of attorneys, depending on the type of case it is, depending on how big the firm is, you might get the paralegal for the scheduling. I personally call people myself because I want them to already start getting comfortable with me and just getting a feel for my energy. But that's my approach.
And you bring up a good point because all attorneys also work differently with their clients, right? Just what you mentioned, you want to have every opportunity to connect and get to know your potential client. Every attorney has their own style and the way that they do things. Once again, you need to be comfortable with the way that they're approaching, representing you.
But I asked someone from the client perspective just yesterday. I said, what were you looking for when you hired your attorney for your case? Which this was a criminal defense case, and it was in Maryland in Frederick County. And what this person said, so I have 3 P's for you. Are they present? Are they professional? And what is their price point? So is it a reasonable price point compared to what others charge in that practice area? Are they present when you talk to them, whether it's on the phone or in person? Are they present and giving you their undivided attention? Does it seem like they care as much about your matter as you do? Because you want that. And then are they professional in how they present themselves, including, say you're getting an ad in the mail. Does it look like they put effort into making it look professional?
And, the consultations I have in immigration specifically, there are many times where clients have worked with more than one attorney because their cases take a very long time. So I also asked in those consultations, well, why are you hiring another attorney? What happened? And it's always, well, I was referred to this one attorney, my family, everybody uses the attorney. So I just started working with that attorney. And then, they never called me back. Communication was horrible. And communication is always a problem. It's one of the biggest problems in the legal industry. The lack of communication in saying what's being done and the lack of establishing what will be done and making sure the client understands what will be done is very important.
I say don't hire the first person that you talk to just because they seem okay, right? So talk to 2 or 3 different attorneys before you pick someone, especially if it's a civil case, especially if it were, for example, a divorce or a custody case, or even maybe if it was a felony case, right? Somebody charged with a felony.
Also, pay attention to how the attorney's office sort of manages you until you get to the consult and when you're in the consult. Is the attorney or the firm you're working with, do they have a process for doing things? Think about when, before you get to the consult, do you get maybe a reminder call of your consult? When you're in the consultation, did you do an intake so that the attorney has the information ahead of time? When you finish the consultation, maybe do you get a letter that says, here's what our consultation was about, here are the services that we discussed offering? All of those things are a process that help the attorney best represent you and help you best understand the services that could be offered.
Managing expectations is important from both perspectives. Correct. But you're saying the fact that they have a process shows that they're organized.
That's what I'm getting at. And this comes a lot from my perspective, combined with clients' complaints, consultations when they're talking about other issues attorneys have had.
And let's put this in context. How many years have you been practicing immigration law now?
Since 2015. So the process is important. Do you want to hire the attorney that'll pick up the phone on the first call and say, yeah, okay, not a problem, we can represent you? Yes, that attorney is the first person to pick up the phone. They answered on the first ring, but I would feel uncomfortable. Like, how are they going to do this case? You need to understand what's going on in your case. Do you know what your lawyer's doing for you? What are they going to do for you when you hire them? I think that's very important.
And you kind of want somebody who's in command of what they're doing for you and how they're doing it.
Correct. You want an attorney that can not only relate and feel compassion for your situation, but can also then take the wheel and say, listen, here's what we're doing. Set a plan.
All right, so let's back up for a minute and talk about the process of when you're looking online, when you're asking people, when you're calling around. So some of the little tidbits, right? You might read their online reviews carefully. The more time you put into this, the better. I've had clients before tell me that my picture helped. Do they look professional? Do they look friendly, compassionate? Some people can tell from a picture. Social media, so are they recommended on social media, or do they have some good, insightful posts on social media that you can review? What do you think about like their years of experience or other professionals recommending them? Like, for example, say you know an attorney because you had them represent you in a certain case, but they don't practice the type of law.
That's a good point. Make sure that you're looking for an attorney that it says they specifically practice the type of law that you have a situation in.
So I would say if you have an attorney that you've used for a different type of case, or if you know an attorney, ask them for a referral, but ask them to give you 2 or 3 names, right?
That's a good point.
Because you don't just want to hire the first person that you talk to or the first person that's mentioned. It's easier now. Do the online research and read the Google reviews or the other reviews or whatever.
We're now in a time also, sometimes you don't have the luxury of taking the time to have 2 or 3 consultations. If it's a criminal case and somebody's in jail and has to get out, you're in a time crunch. But we also are in a time where you can schedule consultations virtually, you can schedule phone consultations, so you can still potentially speak to at least 2 attorneys and not 1 if you're in that situation. We're JD, Juris Doctor. We're doctors, right? If you're diagnosed with cancer, don't you want a second opinion? I always tell, in consultations, I tell potential clients, listen, I always recommend a second opinion, because this is this field requires expertise, and anybody else would get a second opinion.
But if I was a potential client, I would be leery of somebody who seems like they're telling me just what I want to hear.
That's another word. You
don't want somebody who's going to overpromise and underdeliver.
Correct. That's a great point. If an attorney says, yep, we can get this done, we'll do this for you, here's what we'll do, it'll be fine, and that's all that's said,
they don't bat an
Be
eye.
careful. And this also brings me to the point where, when you have your 2 or 3 consultations and all the attorneys say the same thing, don't just get more consultations just to get the answer you want. Go with the consensus. Or be very careful and understand the one attorney that says, I don't agree, we can do it a different way. I would say maybe have them write that out to you. Can you write me what you're offering? Because it's different than the other recommendations I've got.
I would say that you can always call the county bar association. So whatever county in Maryland that your case might be in, you could call the bar association, ask them for a few names in that practice area.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's say you had to move, you moved to Oregon tomorrow. And you don't know anybody there.
Yeah.
And let's say that, yeah, you need a criminal attorney, but you don't know anybody there. Where's the first place you would look?
I probably would call the bar association,
Okay.
right? But I also would try to research online. Is there someone who is a former prosecutor, because those make good defense attorneys?
Okay.
Is there someone who is a former prosecutor that I could hire? And for that type of a case, and maybe for a family law type of case too, I mean, it really depends on the type of case that you're talking about. I tend to gravitate towards a female because I think they're very detail oriented, but I also think that women communicate differently than men, and so I find it easier sometimes to communicate with women just because I feel like I don't have to explain myself as much for them to get my vibe and what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
You know, should you pick an attorney that's the same sort of like its gender than you? Or, you know, that's because you said, you know, women that, and listen, in my life experience, women pay way more attention to details than the men do. That applies to me as well. You know, that's just something I've noticed throughout life. I would probably be more prone to hire a woman for many things. You know, doctor, attorney, because they're more detail oriented.
Well, and they can be, but a lot of people that are attorneys are A-type personality, and that's not really gender specific. And I will say that what is good about some men is that they are laid back, but it doesn't mean that they don't have a strong presence. And like people who have been an attorney for 30, 40 years, like some men are like, I would pick that person because I know them. And that's one thing that I have observed about you, Devin, is that you're very personable. And like, to me, like what I think you have a higher threshold for like BS and getting like and letting a prosecutor get you on tilt than probably what I do.
Yes, and when women pay attention more to details, then yes, they bump heads more with the prosecutors. There are more areas of conflict because of the attention to those details. And you know, but I think that's a lot for somebody, you know, looking for an attorney to think about. That, you know, I think that's if we were looking for attorneys, this is the tutorial roadmap for what we would do.
Well, we'll come back to that. So now it's time for our mid-episode shot. Shall we do another toast?
Okay. So what we have today is Crown Royal vanilla flavored whiskey.
All right. So
Salute again.
cheers to podcasts. I like that. That's smooth. That's smooth.
Yeah,
it's not too vanilla, but you can taste the vanilla. I do like that better than the Crown Maple.
Please drink responsibly.
All right, so some topics that we haven't touched on. So I think we were kind of getting there is what you or I would do if we personally had to hire an attorney based on, you know, just our opinion and experience. And then also when to use your instincts or go with your gut. And I think that this is big really in any decision that you have to make in life. But
I find it interesting that your gut actually is right most of the time.
certainly you want somebody that you're comfortable with. But I do agree with you that we all have that. They say it's fight, flight, or freeze, right? If there's something stressful going on, you're either going to battle through it, you're going to avoid the situation, or you may just freeze. But yeah, if you don't listen to your instincts, it's going to bite you in the butt later. So if you're meeting with someone and what they're saying and the energy you're getting from them, if something just doesn't line up, if something just seems off or inconsistent, don't ignore that.
You know, when I first started practicing, I wasn't confident in consultations that involved questions that I wasn't familiar with the law. And when you're in a consultation, a potential client would expect you to be familiar with all of the aspects of the case. I can learn about that later and do a great job on the case. But in the consultation, I'm not necessarily in that position. And now after much more experience, I would say I am, but I would appear not confident in the consult. And it would show, and I would not feel confident. And I would know when a consult isn't really going well. It's interesting that the potential client, 9 times out of 10 did not sign up with me. So that's sort of an example of they went with their gut. And I'm telling you all now that I wasn't really familiar with the type of case that they presented to me. So that's an example right there of going with your gut. A lot of them did. If it doesn't feel like a right fit, chances are that feeling is correct.
Years of experience matter to a certain degree.
That's also correct, yes.
It's not the be-all, end-all.
A lot of the cases where I feel that, wow, Devin, that case you'll never forget. That was a great case and it worked out amazing. We had a great victory in that case. Many of those cases were cases where I tried things for the first time. So, in other words, cases where I didn't really have any experience doing that situation before. So, experience doesn't exactly matter all the time. There are many other factors to evaluate.
You want a reasonable price. Again, you want somebody who's professional and you want them to be present. So because you saw a particular case as a challenge, you were very present and you brought everything that you could to the table, maybe more so than somebody who would have been practicing 30 years and just thinks that they got it and they're on top of it. And then at the end of the day, the case doesn't go as well as they thought it would.
The things that stick out to me when I'm sort of when I'm thinking to hire somebody for something. But if somebody were to be interested in something that's not even related to the business at hand, for example, in my consultation, sometimes I'll hear clients talk about maybe, my cousin went through sort of a health crisis, so I didn't have time to hire an attorney or get the money together. And then I would wonder what happened, or something that's not related really to the case, but you're just, the attorney is just curious about what's going on and it has nothing to do with what you're there for.
Or your mindset.
I take it as a good sign, and so just like when I'm speaking to somebody, I'm thinking about hiring them. It's kind of quirky, it's kind of weird, but I feel like, wow, this person, they have a genuine interest in talking to you. And to me, when you have a conversation about something unrelated to, am I going to hire you or not? That sort of, to me, is my factor where, wow, that's somebody I want to engage with.
So empathy, can be good, but compassion, I think, is when you drill down to it, that's something that you want to look for, and that is important. Correct. But your gut's not going to kind of steer you wrong, or your instincts, if you will.
Correct.
So if you have really good vibes from someone, and you just didn't feel like it was quite the right fit with the other attorney or two that you spoke to, then that kind of gives you an idea of which way you're going to go.
Hiring a lawyer is daunting. A lot of times when you're looking for an attorney, you're going through one of the most stressful situations in your life. And you usually also have somebody that's there helping you make those decisions. Really, I couldn't urge more to talk to more than one attorney.
I think it's important that they be a good listener and that they reflect back to you accurately what you told them. You shouldn't walk away from the consultation being like, I don't think that they listened to me, or I think that they talked down to me, or did they really get what I was trying to convey to them? The lawyer should make you feel like they fully understood and heard you, and they're going to go about the case in a way that you're comfortable with. From a lawyer's perspective, I'm not going to feel comfortable representing someone that wants to do something that I think is morally repugnant. Like, we could have a conflict of interest. But on the other side of it, if you're the client, you certainly want an attorney who you feel has the same values as you do, if not better or more, or how you want to say it.
And what you're saying is what I hear. So what you value is connecting with your clients, your potential clients, because you've sent me referrals and they've spoken about how passionate you are about what they're passionate about. You're both on the same page. It sounds like you also choose your clients sort of based upon, do we have the same energy going into this together? And I think it's not a one-way relationship. The law is one of the few areas of business where both parties, the attorney and the client, both got to do work. They have to engage with each other. It's an interactive process.
And if it's litigation, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Correct.
I like to think of it as selecting the right horse to ride, because you're going to be riding that horse
Correct.
through trial for many months, maybe
years.
2 years.
My cases take years. So, these are long relationships.
What's the longest case that you've had? How many years?
10 years, decades.
What?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
The long waiting times. I get 7 years. Okay. But that's sort of average in immigration. If your case is going to take 2 years, it could take as long as 7 years. It could take 10 years. So I might see you, I might see your children that you have in the future. It's a long relationship, so you want to make sure that you're picking the right one.
But say that you, Devin, had a case. So say that you got pulled over for, excessive speeding in Maryland. How would you pick who you would hire? I mean, apart from the fact that you have friends, let's put that aside, that you have
Speaking
friends
of-
that are criminal defense attorneys. Just as any citizen, what would you go through in selecting an attorney?
So what would I do? Let's say, and I just heard, if you get a speeding ticket in Maryland, they're now going to arrest you if you're going 20 miles over.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Have you heard of this? I heard that from a friend the other day, yesterday. Let's say I'm in that situation.
It used to be it was a worse penalty if you were going over 80 in Maryland.
But it's like it's I guess an arrestable offense if it's 20 miles over is what I just heard. I'm gonna have to check it.
Is that from the
later.
General Assembly?
Let's say it passed and that's in effect today, right? So I got pulled over and I was arrested and I was released and I have to look for an attorney because I was going 21 miles over the speed limit. So the first thing I would do, and let's also say I don't know any attorneys in the area. I would get on social media. I would start with Google, but then I wouldn't just read the Google reviews. I would also go to Facebook and I would type in, let's say I lived in Syracuse. I would go to a Facebook group and I would ask, does anybody have recommendations? Those Facebook groups are actually very useful. The people that ask for recommendations, they get a lot of comments and a lot of recommendations. And it's a good way to get a consensus.
And you can ask for people to elaborate. So if they say,
Yeah.
then say, can you elaborate on that? Why?
And sometimes you also see when somebody recommends an attorney, somebody else chimes in and says, well, I didn't have a good experience with this person. You might get somebody saying, don't hire this person.
Well, I've seen people chime in, like, for example, on the Everything Frederick Facebook page, I've seen people chime in and say who not to hire.
Yeah, so see, even better information.
So if they advertise well, but if they don't, but if somebody on social media says don't hire them, then
I really think those groups are really, really good information you can get there.
But I've had clients tell me they liked the picture, that I seemed professional, that I seemed like I would be a good listener, that I seemed like I would care.
It seems like, that's sort of like a go with your gut. Like, oh, this feels good. This person looks like, it's somebody I would want to work with.
But I think to recap, what we said not to do is not to necessarily hire the first person that you talk to, and not to hire someone just because one other person had a good experience with that person. Because it could be that they were on the same page, but just because that person was on the same page with that attorney doesn't mean you're going to be on the same page with that attorney.
Now listen, if you see Laura for the first time, you're making the right decision. We are the exception. Let's be clear. For everybody else, you need a second opinion. To me, that's the biggest takeaway. Feel free to get a second opinion after you speak to us. You won't need one.
What I like to do as far as personal contact, I always touch base with people over the phone as far as what I can do for them. As I said, I don't have a paralegal answering the phone or calling people back when someone calls for my services. Now, they have me calling them back, and I like to touch base with my potential clients on what it is they're looking for and why. So I touch base with them initially via phone on what their goals are, give them their price quote verbally, then I follow up with a written fee quote that they can either accept or decline. And if they want to move forward, then we're moving forward pursuant to my office policies and practices. But they've already had a flavor of the process of working with me. So that way there's no surprises, right? But everyone has their process. So it's really what you're comfortable with and what you're looking for. But I find it works for me and my clients.
When you're dealing with legal situations, sometimes you want reality to be different. That's usually the case a lot of times. So folks have very, very high expectations for certain scenarios.
Probably criminal defense, I see it a lot.
I have to get out of jail. The stakes are very high. And sometimes it can cloud what expectations should be. My biggest thing if I were to hire an attorney also would be expectations. I want to know what I should be expecting from your services if I'm hiring. What's going to happen? What should I expect to be done? How should I expect to be treated? That's very important too.
So the role of the lawyer for that particular case should be communicated between the client and the attorney up front so that everybody knows what they're getting
Correct.
and then what they're not getting.
Correct.
I would also add that in the context of divorce or custody, so in the area of family law, you want to know what the hourly fees are. And another thing, if you're talking about a family law case, you want to hire an attorney most times who is local in that area. Because I have seen sometimes where if it's an out-of-county attorney, even if it's a great attorney, the judges don't always necessarily, or the magistrates don't always necessarily respond as positively to that out of town person. So it really depends on, is there a click in that county? And you know, I hate to say that we're still at that point in this day and age where it's not just what you know, but who you know. But I do think to a certain extent, you know, it does matter.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I can represent clients anywhere in the country for immigration law. It's federal law. But if somebody wants me to represent them for a case and it's in California, I don't take the case. I say, listen, you want to find somebody, you know, and California is a big state. You want to find somebody in that region. And I would say it's not also just for, you know, if their relationship is good with the people that are in the courthouse, if they know the judges, but it's also very important to know how the court operates, how the judges' procedures work, because each courthouse does things a little differently. Yeah, so what are their preferences, right?
A good lawyer doesn't just know the law, they know
local rules. They call them local rules, right? But some courts don't have local rules written down, but you know them if you work there, right? So that's very important.
So you want a lawyer that's understands the judges that they're going to be in front of, especially if your case is likely to go to trial.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Dee. This has been the Practical Tips for Hiring a Lawyer episode here on People Acting Like Lawyers and Mostly Malarkey. We thank you humbly for joining us today, and we'll be bringing you more content soon. That's a wrap.